For more than a week now, peaceful protesters across the country have been calling on people to open their eyes and pay attention to the depths of the racism that run through this country, which is why last night's events were so jaw-dropping as we watched U.S. Park Police and National Guard troops using tear gas and physical force to push back non-violent demonstrators near the White House just so the president could walk to a church for a photo op with a Bible following this speech.
I am your president of law and order and an ally of all peaceful protesters. As we speak, I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers, military personnel, and law enforcement officers to stop the rioting, looting, vandalism, assaults, and the wanton destruction of property. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
To paraphrase Pogo, he has met the enemy, and it is us, calling on the U.S. military to go after people of this country on U.S. soil as they focus on one of the most important issues of our time. And as disturbing as that is, as are the incidents of opportunistic violence and looting, it's all a distraction from the real message of hundreds of thousands of protesters about the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and so many more. We've heard a lot of talk since George Floyd's death, but while many offer platitudes, others are posing hard questions, like those from Emerson College President Lee Pelton in a letter he sent to the school community titled "America is on Fire," which ends with the following message. This is not a black problem, but a structural issue built on white supremacy and centuries of racism. It's your problem. And until you understand that, we're doomed to relive this week's tragic events over and over again. What changes will you make in your own life? Begin with answering that question, and maybe, just maybe, we will get somewhere. The most important question is, what are you going to do? Lee Pelton joins me now, along with Rahsaan Hall, who is the director of the ACLU of Massachusetts Racial Justice Program. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I appreciate it. Lee, your letter is the talk of the town. You mentioned that you write that black folks are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Could you share a little bit more of the personal experiences you write about in this letter?
Well, in this letter, I, in a very public way, talked about my encounters with police and with others around this nation and in 3 states that were really very racist in nature and had an impact on me. And I wanted to share those because I wanted to channel in a very public way, through a public figure, George Floyd and all of the other men and women in this country who had to endure that kind of racism.
And by the way, we should say the examples in your letter are not just when you were a young kid, not that that would be excusable, but one of the most egregious is in your prior job as president of another college. Rahsaan, do you know a black man or woman who doesn't have similar stories to tell about their life experiences?
I know that there are a lot of black people who have had these experiences or have had experiences adjacent to this. And it's one of the things that shapes and frames the black experience in this country. And it's very disheartening to know that even in 2020, that these are the realities that we continue to live with. But it's not surprising.
Lee Pelton, you write that structural racism undergirds America's society. So other than white people waking up, and I don't mean to be dismissive of that, and maybe that's the whole thing, what exactly is the roadmap from here to there?
Well, the roadmap is it's a very complex roadmap. We have, as you well know, a number of social issues that undergird this racism. the kind of gap that we see in our K through 12 system achievement gaps. We've seen this in a stark way during this pandemic and the way in which it has impacted folks of color and those from social and economic classes, in a very disparate way.
But don't you think, Barack Obama, Rahsaan, wrote a piece in Medium yesterday, and he says the more specific the proposals are around things like police and criminal justice reform, the less able, he doesn't use the term slimy politicians, but I will, slippery politicians, let's say, are able to just give lip service to a cause and then move on. So is there a specific agenda? Are there specific things that people of goodwill in this country can do, white, black, and brown, to advance this cause rather than just scream for justice? And I'm not belittling that, but a specific agenda?
I think there are a lot of things that make out this specific agenda. It begins with a truth-telling about who we are as a nation and what the role of slavery and oppression has been. And so H.R. 40, which is a federal bill to create a commission to study reparations, is the beginning process of that truth-telling. I think when we talk more specifically about policing practices, qualified immunity, which is a grant of protection to law enforcement to protect them from liability for constitutional violations, is something that the Supreme Court has continued to expand. There is a way for Congress to limit the length to which officers can benefit from qualified immunity, or just to begin at the municipal or local level to talk about divesting from police and reinvesting in community-based alternatives to violence prevention and crime reduction.
President Pelton, does that make sense to you, those kinds of things?
Well, it does. With respect to what happened this weekend, what's happened before with the police, for instance, one of the things that police and law enforcement can do is to train their officers in de-escalation. And that was not present in Minneapolis, and is not present in many cities, because police officers are taught to control by bringing brute force quickly and to these situations. But there's some police forces in the nation where they're actually taught and trained how to de-escalate a situation. And we need more of that in all of our cities and towns.
But, it seems, gentlemen, for what you both described, some people have to be willing to hear what you both say needs to be said. And while I think the argument can be made that Donald Trump is a pretty bad president, he's a pretty good politician. And it seems to me when he gave that statement yesterday before that incredible walk over to the church to hold up a Bible, he didn't mention police brutality. He didn't mention racial oppression. And I assume because he knows that's not what his constituency wants to hear. John King from CNN on our radio show made the point today that when he walked across the street to the church with the entourage of the president, surrounded by 50, 60, 70 people, there was not one person of color, his case being that he doesn't want to hear it either. So how do you make people who need to hear this want to hear this, starting with you, Rahsaan?
I think that's one of the reasons why people have taken to the streets. Nobody wanted to hear it when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee because they received it as disrespectful. And so now people have taken to the streets to have their voices heard. Dr. King has famously said riots are the voice of the unheard, and not what happened last night in Boston was a riot. But he posits the question, what is it that America has failed to hear? And it is these contingent, intolerable conditions that exist throughout America, whether it is excessive policing that results in people being killed by police, or the spread of the coronavirus that is disproportionately killing black people, or the disparities in education or economic and wealth disparities. And so that's what people are crying out about, not just about the police killings.
President Pelton, for people who don't want to hear what you wrote today about being called the N-word at virtually every stage of your life, wherever you have lived. As I said, being a guys pulling a car up onto the curb to stop you when they suggest that you might be a suspect in a case, even though, as you mentioned, the actual person was 20 years younger than you, even though you do look very youthful, I should say. People who don't want to hear that, what does it say about them?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't force someone to hear or read what I had to say. I do know that my letter has resonated broadly across the nation. We've got 42,000 visitors,
Really?
or viewers to that letter on our website, social media, and other platforms. It's being shared. And I think the reason that it has had an impact is because what I'm told is that it seemed to be authentic, and that it was unusual for a public leader, to speak so personally about his or her history, and that's what I wanted to do.
Before you go, last thing is last night the former head of the NAACP in Boston, Michael Curry, was with us and said he thought the killing of Tamir Rice, a little 13-year-old boy, African-American boy in Cleveland, would change things. I was thinking when he said it, I thought when 20 little 6- and 7-year-olds were mowed down in Newtown, that would change things too. Is it possible that we just don't have it in us as an American people to change things? Rahsaan, quickly with you, and then Lee Pelton to send us home.
We absolutely do, but we have to have, we are constrained by the limits of our imagination, and there are too many investments in the status quo, and that is premised on white supremacy. And until we get, again, to the truth-telling of who this nation is, we will probably never see change.
Do you echo those thoughts, Lee Pelton?
Well, this nation has an amnesia problem. We have this capacity to forget on a dime. And we also have a history problem. It's an ahistorical country in many respects. And we need to, all of us need to restore this sense of history so people understand, as I said, what happened in Minneapolis is not new. It's not new. Yeah. And it's as old as 250 years of slavery in this country.
Well, I guess here's to learning and remembering. Lee Pelton, Rahsaan Hall. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you, George.